welcome Shelley Jackson to SUNY Buffalo.
Hi. I'm going to bring down the lights a little bit so that you can see the images better, if I can figure out how. Can I do that? Can I go to lectern? Does that work? Okay. A couple of notes before I begin the reading, just to help you navigate it. It's really two readings that are wound together. One of them is a fictional thread and the other is essayistic. But both of them are thinking about the hand and what its relationship is to the written text. But the fictional thread is thinking about it from the perspective of the end of the world. The nonfiction from the perspective of now, which may not be quite the end of the world yet. They're meant to run together a little, though, obviously, so if you get confused about which part you're in, that's fine. Don't worry about it. But you might be able to tell the difference because I'll switch into the third person when I'm in the fictional section. You'll hear she. You should also know that if any of you have spent any time browsing on Google Books, you may already know this, but you can find all sorts of interesting errors there committed by their scanners, and many of them are documented in the slides I'll show you. This is called I Hold It Towards You, a show of hands. She is the last reader. All the others are dead. Sylvia, Teshale, Zeb. The sand-thick wind is rubbing away what's left of the world. The dim sun makes a red dome of the sky. It looks like the roof of a mouth. Late at night, early in the morning, for whole days together, she finds herself wandering through the hecatomb of the books, the library vaults of quaint, once glorious Google. As the electricity comes and goes, the power cord of her ancient device sizzles and zaps, and moire patterns obscure the screen. When she is hungry, which is not often anymore, she eats white glue, sugar, the occasional ant. Then she resumes her activities. After a while, it occurs to her that she is looking for something. What is a book? Certainly it is not, or not only, a bound stack of stained wood pulp, nor a papyrus scroll, nor a sequence of ones and zeros on a microchip. It is nothing near so definite. I've called it at various times an action, an operation, an interference pattern, a parley, a playground, a parenthetical clause, a syncope, a seance, a Schrodinger's cat, or a Trojan horse. It might also be helpful to keep in mind the obsolete noun handfast, meaning variously a firm grasp, a handle, the handshake that seals an agreement, or a contract or covenant, especially a marriage proposal. But for now, let us say simply that a book is a situation. If a book is a situation, only a small part of the situation is controlled by the writer, though certainly without her there would be no book. What part? What some would call the text itself, particular words in a particular order? No, even this modest claim is not quite modest enough. We certainly did not invent the words we use, nor most of the principles of their arrangement, from grammar to the conventions of story, verse, or rhetoric. Ideas, too, do not leap fully formed from the void. Nor is a book made of words alone, haunting the solitude of the writer's mind. A book would not be a book if nobody wrote it down. It could be a book without being printed and bound, or coded for an e-reader, published, promoted, distributed, and sold. But the typical book you find in stores, to consider, for simplicity's sake, only the codex version, requires a printing press, which requires paper, which requires wood pulp, which requires a lumber industry, and of course trees, which require earth, water, air, and light. It requires ink, which requires pigment and vehicle, mills and filters. It requires glue for the binding, usually made of vinyl acetate ethylene copolymers. To make and mix these substances and bind them together into a book, it requires machines, which require other machines to make them out of parts made by yet other machines, out of steel, aluminum, plastic, vinyl, which all require production. It requires factories and warehouses, which require builders and workers, concrete and rebar, bricks and mortar, lumber and nails, and tar for the roof. To bring all these elements together into a book, and then to distribute this book, it requires trucks, drivers, and passable roads. It requires book reps and buyers, bookstores, and libraries. It may not require, but certainly has, advertisers, reviewers, and venues that publish ads and reviews. It requires money and a whole system of exchange. In short, a situation so complex that it could not spring into existence to produce a single book, but evolved through myriad refinements over time. So a book also requires many other books to come before it, and all this before it ever arrives at the hands of a reader. But perhaps only then is a book really a book. There is much to recommend the argument that a book becomes a book in being read. Yet this simplifies matters only a little. Before we begin reading that book, we must, for starters, know the language it is written in. And have learned to read it, we must know what a book is and how to handle it, how to read it skillfully, with full understanding. So we must know what a story, a character, a plot is, and how it tends to behave, and so we must have read other books. We might also have read book reviews, gone to readings, studied critical theory or the history of literature, and in the interval between picking up the book and starting to read, we've probably taken in at least some of the paratext, i.e. the jacket copy, author photo, blurbs, award stickers, the colophon of the publisher. We might have skimmed an introduction or flipped through an index, and all of these things, ostensibly peripheral, have shaped our reading before we've read a single word of the text proper. And that word itself would mean nothing if it did not call up a response in the reader that's shaped by years of living in the world. For the word leaf, whole autumns of leaves, years of autumns of looking at leaves, at the waxy sheen on the surface, at the way the pattern of the veins repeats the tree in miniature, at the way some leaves break into parallelograms, some turn to lace, and some leave their ghostly prints on a concrete walk. Years of leaves in other books, some pressed between the pages, some in words that now come back unbidden. I have lived long enough. My way of life is fallen into the sere, the yellow leaf. And that's not all, because an open book really is open, susceptible to all the conditions of the present moment, the weather, events in the news, the dream you had last night, a compound response that is idiosyncratic and unpredictable, that is in fact really wild, volatile, swayed by every passing thought, every changing mood, the smell of smoke, the sound of sirens, distant cries. Hence my own work in progress, Project for Polluted Waterway, a pair of stories to be read along the Gowanus Canal, a short tidal estuary in Brooklyn, New York. One story flows in, one out, which you encounter is tide dependent, but both make of pollution at once their central metaphor and their organizing principle through a system of cues, like the peacock colors of a gasoline slick or a condom floating like a ghost, that call up textual pollution in the form of associated prose poems. But all reading is, if not tide-specific, at least site-specific, reader-specific, occasion-specific. Whether the text ignores intrusions or solicits them, the world contaminates the word. And this is not a problem, but a prerequisite for reading, for without this contamination, the word would be nothing. Scratch marks on a page, patterns of light on a screen. In fact, the word is nothing but an invitation to everything the reader leaks into it. And the book, until it's read, is merely the chance of a book, a latency waiting to manifest. As the sky darkens, she finds herself not reading, but paging through, clicking through, scrolling through volume upon volume of old books. The more obscure, the better, because it is in these unfrequented pages that she may catch the passing shadow of another reader. Carol? Sanghwa, Tunde, Netzanet, all of these having worked at one time in the Google Gulag. Manifest, from the Latin manifestus, from manus, hand, plus fendere, strike, literally struck by the hand, hence palpable. When the book becomes a book, you can feel it. For there's one part of the situation of the changing book in the changing world that does not change. We read with our bodies, with our eyes, ears, brain, with minute sympathetic responses in our vocal and oral apparatus, and throughout our nervous system, and with our hands, unscrolling scrolls, turning pages, clicking buttons, swiping screens. In the blind or paraplegic, the body parts are differently weighted, but still, I will say it again, we read just as we do everything else, with and in and because of the body. And then she finds it, on a page frozen in motion, the dark half moon of a thumb tip, the tropical blooming of a purple finger caught on an orange or pink or brown hand, a shadow, an awkwardly erased shadow, a hunched and furtive blur. So books are made for bodies, like an umbrella or a pair of scissors. A book is a hand-operated device and patently adapted to the human form. An alien scientist, handed one, could probably work out what sort of animal must have created such an object for its use. For a codex book refers to and even resembles a human body. It is the weight a person can comfortably carry. It has two sides, one for each hand, and rather looks like two hands, side by side, palms up, in the gesture, in fact, that in the game of charades stands for book. Slammed shut, it claps. Opened, it is symmetrical like a face. And the average page is about the size of a face, the face of someone nearby, someone with whom we are talking as friends. And if the image of the mirror recurs in literature, and I need only mention Borges or Nabokov here, it is not only because we see in books a semblance of the world, but also because we see in them a semblance of ourselves, which finds its logical extension in anthropodermic bibliopagy, or the binding of books in human skin. Or my project, Skin, a story published in Tattoos on 2,095 volunteers. Consider the explicitly anatomical terminology of the book: head, foot, body, spine, joints, footnote and header, chapter, from the Latin caput, head, index, from the Latin index, forefinger. Or my own early works, Patchwork Girl, My Body, and The Melancholy of Anatomy, all three of which in different ways conceive the text as a monstrous body, the body as a wayward text. Nor is it only the book that takes its measure from the body, the spoken word does too, and not just because mouths and ears are its prerequisites. In particular, it takes its measure from the hand. The hand is always a surprise, even when she's looking for it, every time she is shocked, struck, almost physically. The hand is even, the word is not too strong, obscene. It forcibly reminds her of the body she had forgotten temporarily, had set aside. Her own, that is. Well, and all those others, gone now. Lucy, Javier, Wayne, Patanapong. Indeed, the learned very fitly call measure the daughter of the fingers, John Bulwer wrote in 1644, and the Egyptians used to signify measure by a finger painted. Hence the meeting and scanning of verses upon the fingers hath been a very ancient custom. And it was the manner of old in the recitation of the verses of poets, in the measuring and singing them, to note out the intervals and strokes by a certain motion of the hands. So, a dactyl, one of the poetical feet, another anatomical term, took denomination from the drawing in length of the finger, which is to say that it is named after the Greek daktylos, finger, because its syllables go long, short, short, like the bones of a finger. The word poetry is itself a dactyl. It is as if a poem might not only be measured on your fingers, but at certain junctures actually become a finger. And so she thinks it is more than a little sexual. A hand, dressed for intimate contact, has entered the privacy in which, alone at the end of the world, book and reader commune. So, if there is a long-standing link between the hand and language, it is not just because we use our hands to write, though that is an association so fundamental that the way a person forms her letters is simply called her hand. Or because we read with the help of our hands, or of an intermediary shaped like a hand, like the Torah pointer called a yad, meaning hand. We also speak with our hands, the topic of Bulwer's book, Chirologia, the natural language of the hand, where chirologia comes from the Greek chiro, hand. For, he writes, the lineaments of the body do disclose the disposition and inclination of the mind in general, but the motions do not only so, but do further disclose the present humor and state of the mind and will. For as the tongue speaketh to the ear, so gesture speaketh to the eye. The index, for example, advanced from a fist and inclined respective to the shoulder, hath a great faculty to confirm, collect, and refute. In fact, every digit dictates and doth reach unto our sense a mouth excelling speech. And Augustine went so far as to call speech manus oris mei, the hand of my mouth. She gets up to draw a glass of silty water from the shuddering pipe. Drinking through her teeth, she stares out into the marbled haze into which the swollen sun is sinking, then wipes the grit off her teeth and returns to her desk. Her index finger traces little circles on what was once called, she understands, a mouse pad. The printing press put the writing, pointing, measuring hand at a remove, but the hand came back, in, for instance, the popularity of books like Bulwer's on chirologia, or chironomia, the language of gesture, or on chiromancy, or palm reading, or on chirognomy, or determining a person's character from their hand, on fingerprints, on sign language for the deaf, on the new tactile writing systems for the blind, such as Moon Type, Boston Line Type, New York Point, Fishburne, Standard Braille, and more concretely in the fingerprints of their printers and in the marginalia, underlinings, and other annotations of their readers. Yes, let us think about fingering and fisting. Let us think about an index paging through labia, slitting the sealed pages, bursting the binding. Let us let our minds descend into the gutter while the world whirls into dust. The hand of the reader might mark the page without intermediary, folding down a page in a dog ear or tracing a line with a nail, like the slovenly scholar in the Philobiblion of Richard de Bury, whose nails are stuffed with fetid filth as black as jet, with which he marks any passage that pleases him. Or like Eugene Onegin, in whose library there were preserved on many pages the mark of a trenchant fingernail, just as there were, a Russian scholar notes, in Pushkin's own collection. While Nabokov, footnoting this passage, draws our attention to Sheridan's play The Rivals, in which Lydia Languish says of a certain Lady Slattern, like herself a patron of a circulating library, "Yes, I always know when Lady Slattern has been before me. She has a most observing thumb, and I believe cherishes her nails for the convenience of making marginal notes." Slavoj, Samvad, Finnegan, Renee, let us, while the world whirls into dust, memorialize the books and bodies we have loved, and if we get the two mixed up, that's probably exactly the point. Lady Slattern's name inclines one to believe that the reminders of the hand left by her observing thumb are accidental, but we cannot say the same for the ink lines, arrows, stars, squiggles, drawings, doggerel, or most notably, the little hands, or manicules, that readers had been drawing in margins since roughly the 12th century, that is well before Gutenberg, to point out passages of special interest. As if through the communicating medium of ink, our pointing hands could reach down from our own dimension right into the diegetic world and carry on confirming, collecting, and refuting there. One of the things she remembers about books, and she's thinking of the kind that burn, that have burned, that are ashes now, is that they open. And this is one of the things she remembers about bodies as well. Printers sanctioned the manicule, casting the index or printer's fist in a variety of sizes and orientations, and using it as one of many typographical ornaments in the printed book, where it might well share space with hand-drawn manicules, not to mention the word hand, and with the reader's actual hands of flesh and bone. Bodies opened like legs, like hands, like mouths and other orifices. Books opened like legs, like hands, like mouths. And what for? To admit us. The body was like a book. The book was like a body, opening to our desire. Although writers like Richardson made the manicule in the form of the printer's fist an official part of the book, not everyone has recognized this standing. The programmers of Google's search function, for example, which means that although there are, as I gather, 6 manicules in the life and opinions of Tristram Shandy Gentleman, I've only identified 5, and I had to find them the old way, by turning pages, by hand. That is, I found them when they were there to be found, for while some publishers reproduced Stern's manicules, some replaced them with asterisks, and some left them out altogether, along with such other nonverbal elements as the black page, the marbled page, and Stern's idiosyncratic punctuation. So we're back at the question I asked at the outset: what is a book? Which of its attributes are necessary? Which can we do without? Stern's manicules are right on the contested borderline between words and everything else. The texture of the paper, say, whether its binding is savory to mice, its smell. Needless to say, the smell of a book has no ASCII code. That desire, what was it? Not lust exactly, though lust, she suspects, is also not exactly, or not only lust. It was also love, loneliness, curiosity, playfulness, a need for information, a need for diversion, the will to power, the willingness to open oneself in turn. And so the manicule marks, it finger posts, the passage between the inside and the outside of the book. And if its official function is to point inward at the text, it also gestures the opposite direction, with its stump, you might say, outward at the body of the author, the body of the reader, and the body of the book. And perhaps also the desire to multiply oneself, to make more books and bodies. So a purple prophylactic is not a bad precaution. We might inseminate the book. It might inseminate us. We might inseminate one another through our promiscuous books, their pages as stained as cat-house sheets. For the book is more than its text. As the word is more than its meaning, it has a body, and it is only through its body that it reaches my body, and through my body, my mind. Or as you might say, the word was made flesh and dwelt among us. And God forbid she should repopulate the earth now, at the 11th hour. Of course, the word made flesh does not refer to the written word, but to Christ, in whom material word and spirit are perfectly united. The written word, theologically speaking, is only imperfectly analogous to this divine word. It means, but its meaning is not immanent in the word. It must shed its materiality, or we might say die, in order to rise as meaning, leaving the dead letter behind, thus resembling not Christ, but ordinary mortals. Jean, Yevgeny, Joanne, Ashish, Victor. The descendants of Adam, who is made of dust, or as is specified elsewhere in the Bible, of clay, like the tablets into which the still undeciphered symbols of Proto-Elamite were pressed in ancient Iran, the earliest examples of writing we have found. The clay of the tablet is impressed with meaning by hand using a stylus, but God does not require a stylus to shape the clay of Adam. He does, however, use his hands, specifically the index finger of his right hand. Well, according to Michelangelo, in whose creation of Adam, God animates the languid Adam with a touch. Or was she, in spite of herself, looking for company there at the end of the world? Why else would she be so fixated on these hands? Why did she compulsively collect them? Why did her heart open when she saw them, as at a gift or a message from a friend? Touch, however, is famously reciprocal. A profane viewer might see in the same image Adam languidly creating God. For the hands do inspire tenderness. They also look tender, gentle. They have to be, handling those frail old books, despite the finger cots and the clamps you can occasionally see holding down the pages. These accessories seem out of place in the library, an added shock, and yet there is something not entirely inappropriate about the hospital atmosphere they introduce. Certainly, this reciprocity obtains between writer and word. If the mind endows matter with meaning, matter also awakens meaning in the mind. Many writers would say that writing is this process by which the specific qualities of the word create what we want to say, as much as what we want to say creates the word. Matter rubs off on meaning. Matter matters. Is there, in Michelangelo's fresco, a smudge of clay on the tip of the finger of God? There would certainly have been one on Michelangelo's finger, since many fresco pigments, particularly the earth tones, umber, ochre, burnt sienna, in which both Adam and God were rendered, were made from clay. For the writer, the matter that matters might be the clang of a word, almost drowning out its sense, or the way ink sinks into paper fibers. It might even be a smudge of clay if you chose to emulate the proto-Elamites, or any number of other properties of the embodied word, and thus variously of sound waves, of ink on paper, of pixels on a screen. And the manipulation of these properties cannot be separated from writing itself. Now we've moved on from sex to the hospital bed, the scene not sexual but gynecological or obstetrical. Is someone being born? God forbid, God forbid. Consider a story written, weather permitting, on snow, in snow, on sidewalks, stoops, park benches, muddy curbs and tree stumps, and posted in photographs online. A story painstakingly inscribed by hand in a yielding medium, like a clay tablet, and in a classic font, like printed text, but whose readers' readiest associations are probably not with the history of the written word, but with their own first-hand experience, their own hands' experience of snow. Probably they too have played in snow, different kinds of snow, dry and wet, powdery, sticky, crunchy, slushy, have felt the cold soak through their mittens till their fingers ached. Perhaps they've tried to write in it with a finger or a stick, can almost feel the dry flakes that a breath will blow away, the ice crystals that must be chipped through with a scarred tip of a pencil, the icy slush dusted by white powder that with a touch goes black. Or a story painstakingly inscribed by hand in ink on human skin, like early manuscripts on vellum, which is calfskin, and in a classic font, like printed text, but whose readers' readiest associations are again probably not with the history of the written word, but with their own first-hand experience, their own hands' experience of other bared bodies, our own or others, glimpsed in passing or intimately known. And their hands know what bodies feel like, warmish, sometimes sticky, sometimes slippery. But reading skin, unlike snow, the perspective shifts, for readers have skin of their own. They know how this story feels from inside as well as from outside, how it feels to be touched as well as to touch. They might even know how it feels to be tattooed, and if not, they certainly know how it feels to hurt and bleed, seep, scab, itch, and heal. Or is the book not a womb, but a wound? Is the book hurt or dying? The hands smooth down the sheets of paper or of the deathbed. There's nothing they can do to avert what is coming. They contribute only their presence. They attend the patient through its final moments. The scene of reading is a hospice. Whether written on snow or skin, what the words conjure up as signs is accompanied by an ongoing and obtrusive experience of what the words conjure up as matter. These associations summon us forcibly back into our own bodies, so that you could say that the medium interrupts the message. On the other hand, and as the titles imply, skin, snow, these stories are written for and even about their medium to a degree that most stories are not. A so-called immersive reading would then repeatedly direct the reader's attention back to the surface to find the meaning of the story sustained and completed there, which returns the attention to the text. So there's a movement up and down, sinking and rising and sinking again, that weaves together the material world and the fiction, the surface and the depth. Though these spatial metaphors are inexact, since it's arguably the surface of the text that activates what I would call the deepest, that is, most bodily response. A conventional book elicits a less bodily response. Its tactile qualities are more easily overlooked, but these too can be brought in meaningful relation to the text. Paper, for instance, is thin and light, but a pile of it has considerable weight and mass. Take the 545 pages of Moby Dick. That is a whale of a book. It is heavy, it is long, its massiveness, a concrete correlative of the time it will take to read it. Holding it, you know in your body that you have days of travel ahead of you, mountains of blubber to slice into those thin sheets that Melville informs us knowingly are called Bible leaves, and render into the clear oil of understanding. And by the way, if a book is a situation, part of the situation of Moby Dick that has flickered and gone out is the light of the oil lamp by which his contemporaries read it, a lamp filled with whale oil. If what the camera caught was the death throes of the book, then surely the patient has died by now. Is reading then forensic? Is she a kind of coroner seeking the cause of death? A writer can make something of a book's material properties or leave them alone. So while Melville makes much of paper's weight and mass, its whiteness, the intricately figured surface that secures its resemblance to a wall, to a marble tablet memorializing the dead, and to an old white sperm whale's brow, flat but pleated with riddles, he makes little of paper's texture or its smell. The properties of a book are always in excess of its meaning, but they are there all the same, part of your body's knowledge of the book. Here are some things your body knows about a codex book. You can hold it with 2 hands or 1 while you read, with thumbs at the bottom corners or 1 thumb in the gutter at the bottom. You can jam a big book against your body to help support its weight, pulling it toward you with your fingers wrapped around the top edge. You can set it down, holding it open with a hand, the end of a spoon, a hairbrush, the corner of another book, the sash of a window. You can put it in a stand made for this purpose. You can lick your finger to help turn a page. You can run your finger under the line you're reading, or a pencil. You can run a highlighter over it, take notes in the margin, perhaps even draw a manicule. You can fold down corners to mark a page, devising your own systems to do this, folding toward the page where the important passage lies, double folding if both sides are interesting. You can tear out a page to take notes on or use the end papers for this purpose. You can press flowers, leaves, 4-leaf clovers between the pages. On a hot day, you can fan yourself with a book, shade or hide your face with it. You can go to sleep under it. You can pick your teeth with the corner of a page, tear off a piece and use it as a bookmark, or chew on it, or use it to clean lint from your computer keyboard. A pile of books can be used as a seat, as Stern recommends. Do, sir, sit down on a set. They're better than nothing. Or to prop up an air conditioner. You can use a book as a lap desk, hit someone with it, make a shelf or a purse out of it, fold or cut the pages to make a sculpture. If you're a bookworm or silverfish, you can live in it. And I've seen ants use a roadside book to roof their nest. Its pages turn on their hinges like doors, flap like flags. It lends itself to images of screens and scrims, marble slabs, sheets and veils and shrouds and sails, white walls and white whales. Or is reading awake? In which case these hands must belong to the undertaker, who has laid out the body, minimized the evidence of decay, made it fit to view. Our bodies know quite different things about ebooks and the devices we read them on. Where paper has a surface nap, a tooth, electronic devices are smooth, they have sheen, the text skims by under a glassy surface that may reflect its surroundings or cast a light on them. You can use it to find your glasses under the bed or light your way through a dark house. The device may be small and almost weightless, or heavy and stationary. It clicks and slides and shines like beetles, hard on the outside, strange on the inside. The individual page cannot be held. Instead, we scroll, swipe, click. Ebooks are secretive. No one can see what I'm reading, and at the same time, public. I'm online. My notes can be shared with other readers. Amazon records where I left off reading. They might weigh less. They might seem to weigh less figuratively, too, to be less real somehow. Their appearance subject to change, their very presence contingent. The text is only visiting us. We don't really own it. And at some point, our claim to it may be revoked. So imagine reading Moby Dick on an iPhone. We gain a sense of the sleekness of water, of the depths concealed beneath its bright and changing surface, and above all, its reflectivity, so important to Melville that he positioned the story of Narcissus in the first paragraph. So it's not a simple question of one medium being better or worse, more evocative or less than the other, different matter, different meaning. But we lose, on the other hand, all the weight of the whale. We lose the feeling of dissecting that great mass, slice by slice. We lose our tactile measure of our slow progress through it. For while codex books are navigable by touch, ebooks are not. We can't find our way by feel. Our hands can't tell how long they are, or how much of them we've read or have yet to read, and so But this too might suit our iPhone Moby Dick. We can't get our bearings. We're at sea. On the other hand, the screen brightens at the touch like a living thing that likes us. That the hands are touching a book is also part of what makes her like them, because she likes books and is disposed to sympathy toward anyone who touches them gently, even if there's no special reason to think, God knows, that those employed to scan books for Google had any special fondness for them, but they turn the pages just like she does when she reads. Digital texts know when you're touching them, but codex books can seem eerily touch-sensitive as well. Nabokov's invitation to a beheading begins, in accordance with the law, the death sentence was announced to Cincinnatus Sea in a whisper. The double meaning of sentence here, which links death to language, is just a happy accident of translation, perhaps, but the novel's second paragraph explicitly correlates mortality in the text. So we're nearing the end. The right-hand, still untasted part of the novel, which during our delectable reading we would lightly feel, mechanically testing whether there were still plenty left, and our fingers were always gladdened by the placid, faithful thickness, has suddenly, for no reason at all, become quite meager. A few minutes of quick reading, already downhill, and, oh, horrible. A momentary confusion. Is this her hand? For your phantom hand on the page, Soraya, Wang, Trevor, is exactly where, if she were holding the hand, her own hand would rest. And so it is as if she is slipping into register with you, the two hands becoming one, interpenetratingly. So we're nearing the end. Cincinnatus is the one whose thoughts are being paraphrased here, we can deduce, but Nabokov doesn't say so. He says we, and we includes us, all the more emphatically when it designates the readers of novels, a category in which, reading those words, we are obviously included. That being so, the right-hand, still untasted part of the novel seems to designate the right-hand, still untasted part of the book we're holding right now, Invitation to a Beheading, and which, during our delectable reading, we would lightly feel, mechanically testing whether there were still plenty left, directs our attention to our own hand, very likely engaged, such is the power of suggestion, in mechanically testing whether there were still plenty left. So long as we're not reading on an iPhone anyway. And so our real hand, and Nabokov's figurative hand, a disembodied hand belonging to no one and everyone, we mirror or merge with each other. The effect is peculiar. On the one hand, we're thrust out of the story, made aware of ourselves as existing on a different plane than the characters in the book. On the other hand, we're led to that awareness through immersion, through reading, and so we're arguably still in the book, having passed right through its pages to our world rather than withdrawing to it from them. And our real experience, transformed into metaphor, has been made secondary to that of the fictional character, which makes our own reality part of the fiction. Our real hand becomes a sort of holographic projection, a figure of speech. The reader's hand and the diegetic hand reflect one another across some kind of ontological divide. One hand is less real than the other, but which? Their ambiguous contest is subtly recalled in that novel in two later images of estranged doubles, also tied to the hand, a lost cufflink and a lost glove, whose twin is magically visible in a mirror. We should probably keep in mind that our own hands are already doubled. Francois Meltzer suggests perhaps mimesis itself is born of the notion that man has two hands, so that the relationship of fiction to reality is already that of one hand to another. While the feeling lasts, she is stretched between herself and another, Kaya, Musa, Naomi, between present and past, between presence and absence, between page and screen, body and the image of a body. Incidentally, I read aloud William Sherman's essay on the history of the manicule while riding through Northern California to my partner who was at the wheel. And when I got to one of the many passages in which the manicule appeared, I stuck out my own hand and grunted, thus using my actual pointing hand as a symbol for a symbol of an actual pointing hand, in an unintentionally Nabokovian perplex of representation and real. This haunted feeling, is it because of the way that passing moment is frozen, so that page is haunted forever by it? Or is it the way that hand, that reader, Nico, Adelaide, Medina, was haunted in advance by all the others that would come after her, or might be in some dimension outside time already there in that ghostly house of rendezvous with her, the last reader, the late arriving guest. But maybe this confusion, this duplicity, is part of the very nature of the hand. Does the hand represent the self, or is it the self? Is it objective or subjective, thought or thing? For like the mouth, the hand is where thought becomes thing, where ideas find expression, whether in the mouth excelling speech, of gesture, or the written word. It's as if the hand were itself part thought, magma of imagination, just hardening into form, part of our outside, but still hot from our inside. Hegel. Next to the organ of speech, it is the hand most of all by which a man manifests and actualizes himself. This correspondence is recognized legally via the signature, the fingerprint, and the binding handshake. My hand on it. The hand is how you prove you are yourself. It's also how you prove that you're a human being, not a robot. She hunches closer to the screen, clicking, scrolling, clicking, with a mechanical efficiency that eventually raises doubts in the mechanical gatekeeper that watches over these things as to her humanity. This mechanical intelligence is trained to recognize and repulse the overtures of mechanical intelligences like itself. It's a misrecognition in her case, but it leads to a feeling of fellowship. She's not as impatient as she might have been at being repeatedly interrupted with importunities to type words that, because they cannot yet be recognized by machine intelligences, prove that she has human eyes connected to a human mind. Machines are not allowed to read these books, warns the machine. Please type the word you see, notiarg, ensoplad, projsicum, nalicolo, afatra, gatingle, enigum, murming, fropib, deplag. What is the feeling of fellowship then with a machine? Yes, in a way, she's behaving like a machine, and a machine is telling her, I see you. I've singled you out, I recognize you. Or is it the fellowship with all the other bodies, Carol, Allison, Coco, Kate, that have passed muster only because they have hands and eyes, or ears and mouth? For the blind, there's also a sound file in which a human can make out a sequence of numbers, and those who cannot type can dictate their response. The machine is telling her, I thought I knew you, but now I see that you have hands, eyes, ears, mouth, mind. You're not like me, because I know this word but could not read it. For it turns out we still read and write with our bodies. Digital media have even restored to relevance what the printing trade news in 1914 disdainfully called those poor overworked fists, also known as manicules. Digital, of pertaining to or using digits, the numbers below 10, i.e. those that may be counted on the digits or fingers. That's because since around 1987, with the release of HyperCard, the arrow cursor has generally been replaced when it hovers over a clickable link by a tiny right hand with index finger extended. The hand pointer is like the manicule in a number of ways. It points, it's severed at the wrist, it extends our reach into the virtual world, but it differs from the manicule too. We see it from the back, as we would see our own hand pointing away from us or reaching out to touch something, rather than from the side. It doesn't have a cuff, as many manicules do. It sometimes wears a glove, or is a glove. The window panes rattle. Something comes loose above her and slithers across the roof. She turns the page and, no, really, isn't that her hand? For she too is a ghost. She too drifts over these pages unseen, except for that tiny bone-white hand with which she clicks, scrolls, clicks. The hand pointer was intended to convey to novice users, through a symbolism so natural it required no explanation, that the text or icon below it could be touched. That is, that a movement of the hand would do something to it. The users were encouraged by the image of the hand to feel that they were interacting directly, physically, with the image on the screen, reaching right into the virtual world. In reality, of course, the user was touching a mouse, whose changing positions were translated into coordinates, transmitted down its cable to a computer, which translated those coordinates into changing patterns of light on a vertical screen. But no, it's nothing like her hand. She finds herself scrutinizing the fingernails when visible, longer than hers, or shorter. Colliner, Eleanor, Binyam, Abdullah? Lacquered, chewed to the quick, or with a crescent of dirt under every nail, squared off in a way that she finds vaguely repulsive. The rings or watches, the skin that is patently younger, patently older, smoother, hairier, lighter, darker than hers. The mouse was called a mouse because it looked like a mouse. Because the mouse was called a mouse, units of movement are called Mickeys. And for the same reason, in certain operating systems, the little hand that replaces the cursor when it hovers over a link has, if you look closely, 3 radial stripes on the back that make it instantly recognizable as a Mickey Mouse glove. So that hand with which we're encouraged to identify our own hand is the hand of a cartoon mouse. We are, in a sense, not merely touching a mouse, we're becoming a mouse, a cartoon mouse. A black cartoon mouse that's wearing white gloves because its original inspiration was Al Jolson in The Jazz Singer, who wore white gloves, as was established convention for white singer-actors performing in blackface. So the hand into whose white glove we're encouraged to insert our own vari-colored paw belongs to a black cartoon mouse who stands for a white film actor in blackface who stands for a racist stereotype of a black man. Feigning inclusivity, since anyone of any color and several species can wear a glove, the Mickey Mouse cursor actually makes a mockery of difference, and the natural symbol of the hand turns out to encode a very culturally specific series of impersonations, nested gloves, of which our own identification is just the most recent. If this is her hand, then she's a white man with calloused knuckles. No, she's a black woman with a manicure. No, she's an aging white woman. No, she's a young East Indian man. Can I even say the hand when every hand is different, when even our own right and left hands are not the same? Does this glove fit a left-handed reader in the same way it fits a right-handed one? And now her mood changes. Now the images make her sad and a little sick, like the sordid photographs of a private detective. The book has been unfaithful to her. The book has let someone else touch it. It is opening, but not for her. Now the book for the first time seems to be turning away, refusing to meet her gaze. Now she knows what she did not really know, did not really feel before. She was not the first. Books too have their gloves. They say, let's pretend you're anybody. We pass through their passages, passing as the ideal reader, the one for whom they're intended. But take off the gloves, and every reader has a unique and specific hand, wrinkled, smooth, brown or pink or beige, with torn cuticles or painted fingernails. Every reader has a unique and specific body with a specific age, gender, race, class, personality, set of obsessions, memories, desires, dreams. The ideal reader, like the text itself, is a fantasy, but one that haunts digital media as it has haunted the printed book. No, she was not the first. She's the last. She's outlived them all, Ramon, Luke, Tawanda, Molly Sue, all dead, all gone, except for a thumb here, 3 fingers there, see, there. Perhaps a search for some outmoded term, mesmeric, phrenological, will turn up more. I use the word haunt advisedly. The early days of spiritualism corresponded not coincidentally with the early days of communications technology. Edison thought he might be able to get the dead on the line, and the internet recapitulates the vision of a vague spirit world to which anyone anywhere who could pick up a signal could connect, and where our souls can wander disembodied, deracinated, imperishable, and unearthly as ghosts. And the finger pointing forward across a desktop could also be seen as pointing up, perhaps toward heaven, a gesture familiar from Renaissance art and Masonic ritual, perhaps into what someone not coincidentally decided to call the cloud. Again, she triggers the mechanical gatekeeper. She types begracto fonsubi megmusb and is cleared. There's a feeling of triumph that's out of proportion to the achievement. Is it because of a test, even an easy test, seems like an occasion for judgment and she's been judged worthy? This moment of judgment, of passing or failing to pass as human, makes her think of the heavenly gates. Here a machine plays the part of St. Peter. And of course it's true. The internet is where books went when they died. Earlier I said that reading has long been regarded as an analog of that operation, we'll call it death, by which God lifts the spirit from the imperfect material body. It's only logical then to regard publishing as a sort of demiurgy and reissue as resurrection, or as one of our founding fathers wrote, The body of Benjamin Franklin, printer, like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out and stripped of its lettering and gilding, lies here food for worms. But the work shall not be lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more beautiful edition, corrected and improved by the author. But the metaphor is out of date. The god of books has moved on from reissuing out-of-print titles in deluxe editions and is now overseeing Google Books' library project. Since 2004, Google has been raising the ghosts of books en masse from their brown and crumbling bodies, bleaching them white and installing them in a digital heaven as pure, eternal, disembodied text, or trying to. There's that little matter of the hands, which is to say, a little matter. The smudge of clay on the finger of God who forgot to put on his purple finger cot, because it turns out that the body comes back when a page is turned too slowly or too fast, is crumpled when it should be flat, when a fold-out page is folded in, when the color variations of aging paper register as anomalous visual data, when the page doesn't fit the frame, but above all, when someone's hand gets in the way, the scanner's hand. If this is the afterlife, it's not too bad, no body, but the semblance of a body preserved forever. Only then, why this loneliness that becomes most acute when it is ruptured? Remember that manifest means struck by the hand. The hand is the original, the epitome of what strikes us as real. Nothing is more real, more manifest than a hand. And whatever a hand is touching seems realer by its touch. In fact, the presence of the full-color hand not infrequently deceives the scanner into reading the page as a full-color image, thus preserving all the evidence of wear, the chips and stains and fingerprints, the yellow ochre and burnt sienna of oxidation that the process is supposed to strip away. So the manifest presence of the scanner's hand on the page attests to and reasserts the physicality of the page at the exact moment, and as a result of the same process through which the text takes flight into the virtual, as if to intervene, to hold it down, hold it back. She once wrote in her journal decades ago, she was in her teens, that strangers' hands inspire a tenderness in her that their faces do not. They look like innocent animals, she wrote. They don't know what their owners have been up to. They're not to blame. And she recognizes her own innocent hands in them, hands that she sometimes pities for being yoked to her ungrateful, complicated, sometimes sorrowing self. In Hawthorne's story, The Birthmark, a lovely woman has a scarlet birthmark on her cheek in the shape of a tiny hand. Her scientist husband, disturbed by this, uses his arcane arts to remove it, and when he succeeds, she dies. Hawthorne helpfully explains that the hand represents human imperfection, which is what binds us to our material existence. Remove this encumberment and our spirit takes flight. The ideal is quite simply ideal, which is to say immaterial. So the hand is figuratively what holds on, holds us to the world. And likewise, the hand holds the book to the world. We might think we can eliminate the imperfections of the material medium, releasing the rectified text as pure language that can no longer warp or fade or crumble to dust. But the hand reminds us materiality, with its imperfections, is the condition of possibility for books as it is for people. It is even the condition of possibility for the digital afterlife, that after all is only an imitation of eternity, bound to matter, to silicon, copper, polymers, glass, every bit as surely as the books it harbors. Matter matters. One might as well learn to like it. Of course, it's too late for Georgiana, the woman with the birthmark. And the Google hand, even as it points toward the materiality we've left behind, is borne along in this flight from the manifest into the ostensibly eternal afterlife of the digital. But it bears with us something that does not belong in eternity, now. Gary, Elspeth, Alyosha, one thing is certain, they're not posing for the camera. They're caught in passing, in an intimate and unthinking moment of rest or industry, like rats in a security cam. Each blurred page, each finger caught in motion captures a now that was, now passes. That's what makes it a now, and thus a then. So this obtrusive, this manifest presence also evokes an absence. We do not meet a person in them, a person we might not like, who might not like us, of whom we might disapprove, a person who is looking at us, looking at them. These hands are not looking at her. They don't know she's there. Her gaze can linger on them without fear, though there is fear of a different kind, she senses, fear for the hands, maybe. Toward the end of his life, Keats left a sort of manicule in the margins of the manuscript of another work. It's the following very short poem. This living hand, now warm and capable of earnest grasping, would, if it were cold, and in the icy silence of the tomb, so haunt thy days and chill thy dreaming nights that thou would wish thine own heart dry of blood, so in my veins red life might stream again, and thou be conscience calmed. See, here it is. I hold it towards you. I hold it towards you. I, you, it. Such words derive their only meaning from context, and certainly we can imagine a context in which it is a real hand that the speaker, I, who need not be Keats, holds out to someone in particular, you, saying, grab me now, you'll be sorry when I'm dead. But because I and you and here are not bound to any specific referent, we can also take them to refer to the present moment in which I is in fact Keats, you is the reader, and here is the poem. And it is what? Well, for one thing, it's an indexical sign, indexical from index, forefinger. It's a word that points like a hand. It also points at a hand, or so we're given to understand. That hand, however, is missing. We're alone with some words on a page, after all. So we have here a poem about imagining something missing that's actually here, when what the poem really does is imagine something here that's actually missing. This being perhaps the last poetry Keats ever wrote, we must suppose that he knew quite well that his actual hand would itself soon be absent. In Tristram Shandy, Sterne says, "It is a singular stroke of eloquence not to mention the name of the thing when you had the thing about you ready to produce, pop, in the place where you want it." This is a thing more easily done in person than in print. Literature cannot often hold out the thing itself in place of the word, but it can certainly hold out the absence of a thing. And maybe that's what Keats is holding out to us. If so, however, it's an uncanny, obtrusive, a manifest absence, an absence we can almost touch, because although the hand is not literally there, its ghost most palpably is, or its several ghosts. Keats' actual living hand, the living hand of the poem, Keats' actual dead hand, the dead hand he conjures up in words, and its anticipated ghost, all of these melding impossibly into one disembodied hand thrust right out of the page. The poet Mary Ruefle says, "The poem is nothing but a giant disembodied hand pointing a finger at someone." Is it pointing, though? Isn't it offering the reader a hand to hold? These people will die? Is that what she feels? They're not then the undertakers, not the nurses, but the patients. Hands, you're going to die. But everyone is going to die. Perhaps that's why these hands seem like the exemplary hands, the ones that most perfectly express our condition as readers, stretched between life and death, between matter and spirit, obscene and pitiful, moved and moving, somebody's hands, real, and yet not anymore, not ever again. And if we should clasp that hand, well, touch is famously reciprocal. In showing how hands haunt the book, I might seem to be arguing for a fully materialist practice of writing, ignoring the power of language to conjure up the invisible, the immaterial, the frankly impossible. But a handfast takes two hands. So when I say the book is a situation, I might add the situation is also a book. That is, when brought in contact with a fiction, it begins to feel like fiction, protean, phantasmagoric, and infinitely subject to revision. But where and how on earth can the real world touch a fiction? In us. Because we ourselves are ambiguous creatures, part thing, part thought, both real and imaginary, have bodies and also minds. And when we reach across the border where what is touches what might be, where the actual meets the possible, which is to say where fact meets fiction, we feel in our own bodies the scandal, the intimate impropriety that the beloved of gods must feel, fucking clouds and swans, giving birth to beautiful monsters. Bruno Schultz wrote, "Under the imaginary table that separates me from my readers, don't we secretly clasp each other's hands? The unalienable presence of the hand in the written text attests to the inexhaustible delight and consternation of this rendezvous. And so we've made the hand into our emblem, our sigil, our signature, our cipher. We're born into this Freemasonry, this odd fellowship of the body, and the hand is our secret symbol, our gang sign, mutely testifying to the body's enduring presence down all the years of book history. A muted post horn, a wordless symbol for this meeting, this covenant, this handfast. A hand reaches out of the book, and the storm is rising outside. Books there are few. Readers, beside herself, there are none. Indeed, humans are scarce enough. Hard to believe they were once so numerous, once had the power to destroy, well, everything they did destroy. Would any animal elevated to our estate by evolution or God have done as badly as we did? She thinks so, probably. We would not have risen to the heights we did without the very qualities that led to our destruction. A rat or mouse is rummaging in the walls. Some hardy creatures live on. The world will be theirs, what's left of it. Some will nest in our books or eat them. They will not read them. But perhaps someday, eons hence, someone will stop by our cooling planet with the will and aptitude to inquire into the writing we leave behind. It is frivolous to wonder what members they will use to turn these pages. Mandibles, tentacles, pseudopods, no earthly names will serve, and so we might as well call them hands, and their owners simply people, or readers, for that they read and that they touch our books is what matters, not the organs they apply to the task. And if they are readers, they are our sisters and brothers or even ourselves, for that is what she knows. That is the knowledge she keeps, a warmth banked low under her ribcage. In books, we transmigrate. Dear reader, she, transmigrant, types, and typing, her fingers seem to touch the tips of other fingers, typing the same letters back in perfect synchrony. Thank you. Am I supposed to answer questions? Does anyone want to ask me a question? Sorry, that was very long, but I had so much to explain, you know.
Do you feel like maybe telling them about the tattoo project?
Sure.
Just in brief, 'cause,
Just describe what it is.
yeah.
In 2003, I think, I launched this project called the Skin Project, a story with 2,095 words in which its only form of publication will be tattoos that I assign one word at a time to volunteers. So, one person might have a the, another person might have an of, another person might have a tree, what have you. The participants are not allowed to read the book until they've gotten a tattoo, and they're not allowed to share that text with anybody after the fact. So the majority of people who read some part of the text will just read a random word in passing, like the word skin on my wrist, which is the title, without knowing exactly how it fits into the context of this fictional story. And perhaps without knowing that there is a story that links this word to other words all migrating around the world at the same time. Another project that I alluded to in this talk is my snow project, which is a story that I'm writing in snow by hand, one word at a time. Also a very slow process. I've been doing it for about 4 winters in succession, I think, and I'm maybe 2/3 of the way through the story. As I write them, I photograph them and I put them up online, and I have a set on Flickr and also on Instagram, so that you can read the entire story that way. Or you can just come across a random word melting on the sidewalk somewhere. In New York mostly, although I've agreed if it snows overnight to do some here as well.
5 days here.
Yeah, okay, well, So my plan is, if it snows, I'm going to Silo City, which I think will be a cool place to photograph some words. And if I can, I'm going to do at least one really big one. Whoa, sorry. And try to climb up to the top of the silo so I can photograph it from above. Let's see, what else? I referred to Patchwork Girl, which is my very early, kind of my first published work, which predates the internet, if you can imagine such a thing. But it's not a book, it's a hypertext that you read on a standalone, used to be a floppy disk, now a CD, interlinked pages about a female Frankenstein monster. And then I've also published a few books, all of them in some way thinking, I think, just as this talk does, about what is the weird relationship our body has with language or with ideas, with the imagination. How do we stretch across this gap? I mean, it's the old mind-body problem of philosophy, but I'm stuck on it still, I guess. So I just keep turning it over and looking at it in different ways. Yeah.
I'm wondering if this performance that you just did is meant to be experienced immediately in any kind of way other than a recording, is my first question. And I'm also curious if all of these images were found, or if, I noticed some of them had glitches that visually I don't really attribute it just to the scanning or something like that, and I'm just wondering if they were all found.
They're all found, yeah. They're all from, well, there are one or two that I pulled off of other sites, but almost all of them are ones I found myself by accident by looking through Google Books. So, and you guys, you will stumble upon them too. If you look through the older books, which not the contemporary books, which have probably been looked over by somebody, but really weird things like the records of some court proceeding from 1732 or something like that about the price of wool or something that nobody would really want to read. A lot of times they've been scanned really carelessly, and you get on almost every page maybe some glitch, the scanner's hand, or a page that's caught in motion, or the page sort of warping out of the frame or something like this. And I started collecting the images, particularly of the hands, before I even started this project, because I mean, as I expressed in the talk, they're just so freaking striking to me in this context that seems so bloodless. You know, this kind of abstracted space of text, the infinite textual, like the sea of textuality, and suddenly you have this incredibly real, concrete hand that was obviously appeared in a particular moment, particular place, particular afternoon, particular fingernail, everything of that moment, everything that the internet, or everything that Google Books is trying not to do, trying to provide sort of an infinite access and that's not bound to any site, and suddenly it's like all crashing down into this one moment.
Just a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Do you feel that kind of force, that sense of temporality kind of forced it into speculative fiction in a sense?
Made me want to respond to it in that way?
Yeah.
It made me want to respond to it personally. So I didn't start out by writing speculative fiction, but I always write in a very ramshackle and unplanned way and then organize it afterwards. And what I found in my notes was that on the one side there was this sort of like emotional, personal response, but that I also was interested in kind of unpacking in a more careful way the kind of literary history of appearances of the hand and how people have thought about the hand's relationship to the book. And so I just pulled the two threads apart, and it felt right then to me to move back and forth between the two, and then that itself becomes a way of having two hands, a text with two hands in a way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If the book is an analog for the body for many reasons, but also because it interacts as a purpose with us, it's made to fit our bodies,
Mm.
etc. is this piece about like a kind of mourning for there not being a better digital analog for the digital body? Is this sort of like a lack that you are trying to talk about in a way, or what?
Do you mean, I'm not sure I've totally followed you. Do you mean that we don't have as strong a sense of the body of the thing that we're reading because it passes through all these shifting forms,
Or
or what?
as we start to live more in our digital bodies,
Yeah.
you know, sort of, have we found, yeah, exactly, have we found our proper digital analog for the book, our interaction with text, or the
Yeah.
one that flies, or...
Well, I guess what I would say is that part of the experience of having a digital body, although I guess I don't usually think of it quite that way, but part of our experience of living much of our lives online, simply, is of shape-shifting. So I don't know that we will find something that feels as organically concrete as a sort of a figure for us, as the book has felt. And I guess one of the things that I have been thinking about, well, one of the things I was thinking about way back when I was writing Patchwork Girl, actually, is that to some extent, though, our earlier sense that the book sort of firmed us up and made us feel more coherent and real and unified, was that we were deluding ourselves about that books are also fragmented, patchworked, evanescent, part one beast, part, chimerical, and constantly disintegrating, passing away and forming other books. So that I always saw more kinship, actually, than most other people seem to want to acknowledge between the emergent hypermedia and the old form of the book. So that I was always trying to underline the connection that I saw, actually, the ways in which books also function kind of like strange networks or webs of references. But then at the same time, I want to move back the other direction as well and say that digital media retains a physicality that we can't get rid of, even if we want to, which sometimes it seems like that's part of what digitization is about, is getting rid of the body. But there isn't any getting rid of it. Like, even though compared to a book, it feels more like I don't know where this is or something like that, it's still coming into my eyes, I'm touching it with my hands. It's right here, the same, it's like the size of a book if you open it. And we even retain these nostalgic references to the book, Facebook and stuff like that. We can't get rid of the idea of the book. We can't get rid of the idea of the body. Even as we're like imagining ourselves cyborgs, we're drawing little hands to be our representatives everywhere. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
How do you think a book would look like if you had no hands?
If we had never had hands as a
nubs.
species.
Yeah.
That's really hard to imagine. Do we have legs? If we have legs, then
Do we have claws?
I'm thinking, well, you can turn pages with like your nose, probably, or your toes. Maybe a scroll might be easier to handle, I'm thinking, than something that you have to actually pick up with between an opposable thumb and finger and turn. So something maybe more continuous, a scroll, or maybe something like laid out in a strip that you walk along. I don't know.
Perfect.
Or, if you have no hands and also no feet and you're nothing like a human being, but maybe you're more like an amoeba or a slug, then it might be like a sequence of smells or something like that, or something you eat. Sorry, anyway.
Interesting.
Melissa, are
I
you?
was gonna say I had a really weird virtual book experience one time because I returned a book to Amazon Books, but it was still on my device.
Uh-huh.
And so the next day I turned on the device and opened Amazon Books and it just like sucked that icon and book just sucked away.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
I felt like you say, like you order something, you say, okay, I'll mail it back to you, right? And so
Yeah.
the store usually trusts you, if not, they send the sheriff or something, right? But I felt like they sent over a cat burglar who came in the window and just grabbed it out of my backpack and ran, you know what I mean?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it was like quite an intangible feeling. It was like, it was really a book because they came back and stole it, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
and it wasn't really, it couldn't have been really yours.
Huh?
It could never have been really yours if at any moment
Right, and
if
that's
they
the
wanted
thing,
to, they could
that's the thing,
siphon
yeah,
it back into the,
Which you mentioned when you were talking to me before too, it's like we're all sort of far away from books that are online.
yeah. But you know, if you want to keep reading a book that's overdue at the library, just go into airplane mode. And they can't suck it out of your out of your phone until you go back online. It's a little helpful hint. Yeah.
I really appreciated the history you showed because it brought to mind all the ways we have been manipulating books all along. And it was, I guess we forget about it and it's really transparent. But equally, I think with our discussion of the body being removed from reading digitally, I can't think of, grabbing an iPhone or an iPad, the pinching gestures, all the finger gestures we use.
Yeah.
I mean, it's constant what we do with these phones, with the iPads. I think probably to a degree, even more so than what we used to do with books.
All this.
And
Yeah.
because there's multiple
Oh,
kinds
you
of
know what's
gestures.
amazing? I mean, you guys are probably most of you too young to have kids, but when the kids who have grown up looking at iPads and iPhones will look at books and do things like that with the pages of books, or they'll say, "Can you pause this book? I need to go to the bathroom," or they're
It's amazing that
they're
that's
like, "Can you
become
make
so
it move?"
transparent, too, that,
Yeah.
you don't really think about how much manipulation we're doing
Mhm.
of this digital device, which I think is, to a degree, more heightened than what we used to do with books.
I don't know if I would say it's more heightened, but it's certainly very, yes, it's physical and it's quite intuitive and it's constant. Yep. All right. Let's call it a night.